of God is eternal life. You got to repent of all your sins. Book of Genesis, which we will probably do that on next week, give you a breakdown of the entire book, and then go through the book with some key points to make in various chapters. Can we say amen? Amen. I think will be very educational for you. And of course, we've already started on the first chapter, and we got as far as the first 5 verses. And so we're going to have to proceed expeditiously to try to get through the first, the second, and the third chapters tonight in about an hour and 15 minutes. So, as we've already started with the first few verses, I want to make another point on the verses that we didn't make that we covered on Tuesday night. And that is simply of the fact that, of course, in verse number 1, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. Now, of course, we already covered that between verse number 1 and verse number 2 is 35,000 years. Who all was here when we covered that? You know, and if you weren't here, you might want to get the CD. CDs are pretty cheap, probably the cheapest in all churches everywhere. But 35,000 years between verse number 1 and verse 2. Now, what we want to look at is in verse 3, and God said, let there be light, there was light, and God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God divided the light from the darkness. Now, what we have in the creation narrative that we're reading is that this is what's going on in God's mind. God is planning this in his mind. The first chapter of Genesis and the first 4 verses of the second chapter is not what God did, but what God planned to do. This is why you have in verse number 24, and God said, let the earth bring forth a living creature after his kind, which is man. And then you have him in verse 26, let us make man in our image. And in chapter 2, verse 7, you have him actually physically making man. 2 of those narratives are the same. One of them is different. In verse 26, it's completely different, and we will deal with that as we've taught a Bible class on Let Us Make Man. We're going to do a book on Let Us Make Man also. As a matter of fact, we got about 6 books we're going to do because people have been requesting them online that have gotten the study guide in the book of Daniel. So we're going to do about 6 books, Lord willing. However, in the first 34 verses of the Bible, which includes the first chapter and the first 4 verses of the second chapter, is God's blueprint, his plan. He planned everything out, and then he went to work on his plan. Just like an architect, he makes his plans and draws a blueprint of the building before he evens, lay a block, or nail anything, or pour any concrete, whatever. The building plan is already made out. The architect lays it out. The square footage, how many rooms it's going to be, how big the rooms are going to be, and what have you. He lays it out first. Then he goes to work on what he has created, so to speak, or what he had laid out in his plans. Well, the first 34 verses of the Bible is what God did. That's where we got that from, that concept from. We got that from God. And the first 34 verses of the Bible is God's blueprint concerning his 50,000 year period, which is roughly time. So the first 34 verses deal with God's plan as to what he was going to do in a 50,000 year period called time. All right? Now somebody says, well, where do you get the 50,000th year? Well, Israel every 49 years was a celebration. 7 years of 7 Sabbaths, 49 years. Then they celebrated the 50th year, which was called the Jubilee. And when they acted out that celebration, that was a type of God's 50,000th year of time, which is called the Jubilee of all Jubilees. And we don't really know in detail as to what will be going on during that time, other than that when Israel celebrated their 50th year or their Jubilee, everything went back to its original condition. If they had servants, they would release them. If there were debts that had to be paid or debts owed, they would forgive the debt. And everything would return back as it was. Debts were forgiven, so on and so forth. So that's the only glimpse that we have concerning what possibly may happen when we enter into the 50,000th year of God's time. Notice these are God's times. And in the 7 days of creation, these are not our days. These are whose days? God's days. And you know that they're different because each day here ends evening and the morning, or the first day, second day, and so on and so forth. So these are not our days. These are God's days. And that's what people fail to realize when they deal with the creation account. They think of it in terms of our days. And of course, when we talk about the Bible, you cannot deal with the Bible based upon your thoughts or your customs or my thoughts and customs or the westernized concept that we've all, or culture that we've all been raised in, because during Bible times, their world existed around the Mediterranean Sea. The furthest south they went was Africa. And I can't remember exactly how far north, but there were no such thing as Europe. There was no such thing as the United States. So when you deal with the Bible, you can't think of terms of how the world is now, because the world was completely different. The whole world was not even populated. The whole world was not even lived upon at that time. So this just gives you some idea of the type of mindset you should have when you deal with the Bible. And a lot of people don't understand that. So, but in verse number 4, God divided, and God saw the light that it was good. He didn't say the darkness was good, but the light was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And darkness and light and darkness have been divided ever since. Now, what this shows is the plan of salvation. And how does it show? God demonstrated the plan of salvation in the first day of his creative week. Because light represents the children of God, darkness represents the children of the devil. The scriptures, Jesus said in St. John chapter 8, verse number 12, he said, I am the light of the world. Then John said in first epistle of John, chapter number 1, he said the message that we've heard from Jesus is that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. So do we have two lights or one? One, because Jesus and God are one and the same. He's the Father, he's the Son, he's the Holy Ghost, he's the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, he's the High Priest, and so on and so forth. So God, in the first day of his creative week, established what we know as sanctification. Sanctification is the principle of God that deals with separation. That's why Paul told the saints in Corinth in the second chapter, or the second epistle of the 6th chapter of Corinthians, he says, come out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and I will receive you. God here is establishing the fact that light is supposed to be separate from darkness. or that his people are to be separate from the children of the world or from the children of darkness. This is sanctification, because sanctification means to separate and set aside for the holy use of God. And when God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God separated the light from the darkness, it's a precedence that he set that still exists today, that God's people are to be separate from the world, and that God's people are to be sanctified, set aside for his use. That's why we're not supposed to behave like the people of the world. We're not supposed to do what the people of the world does. We're not supposed to go where the world congregates to go to commit sin. We're not supposed to be involved with the world's music. We're not supposed to be involved with the world's behavior. We are separated. God divided the light from what? The darkness. And we're supposed to remain that way. Now, this is a precedence that he set in the first day. And it was a precedence that he set on the first day of his creative week. In his mind, he felt it was important to establish the principle and the fact that throughout his creation and throughout time, that light and darkness would be separate, that they would be on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Now, right, wrong, good, evil, righteousness, unrighteousness. Can we say amen? God, Satan, heaven, hell, angels, demons, saints, sinners. He established this on the first day. This is the principle in its germ form of sanctification, separation. And he did that on the first day of his creative week, that we are to be separate. Now, what the devil's trying to do is that he's trying to get us back into where God brought us out of. He's trying to mix us together. He said in the New Old Testament, the Lord said through one of the prophets, Ephraim has mixed herself, and she's like a cake unturned. In other words, Ephraim was a term that God gave to Israel because of their backslidden state. And the indictment that God had is that the light intermingled with the darkness. And throughout time, concerning God's people, God has always had a godly seed and an ungodly seed. He's always had his people and the people of the world. And even in the flood in Noah's day, the flood occurred because the light intermingled with the darkness. And what it did was that it produced such great wickedness. Now we have the same problem today. We have some of the things that go on in the world that go on in the church. We have the saints of God that are the children of light doing some of the same things that the children of darkness do. Listening to the dark music or the worldly music. Going to fraternizing clubs or what have you. We are not children of the dark. We are the children of the day, as one scripture says. We've got to remain separated. And it is those that remain separate from darkness, that stay with the light, are the ones that will be in the rapture. Because the Bible says that, well, even John, in the first epistle of John, he said the message we heard from Jesus when he was here is that God is light. Now, why was that so important for John to emphasize that that was the thing that they've learned about Jesus, that he taught them? That God is light and in him is no darkness at all. And he says if we say that we are in the light while we are in darkness, we lie. And the truth is not in us. Because there is a difference between truth and falsehood. And the two are to remain separate. It's just like in our cars. We have batteries. And on those batteries, there are two terminals. One of the terminals says positive. What does the other terminal says? Negative. And they are separate. And we're supposed to keep them separate. We have these outlets in our car that connect on to each of the terminals of the batteries. And if you was to cross them, what could happen? You can have an explosion because they don't mix. They are to be separated. The same God, where did we get that from? The first day of God's creative week. He established that the first day. We have to keep it separate. You know, just so much in this first chapter. We can take 6 weeks on just the first chapter of Genesis all by itself. You know, but we're just going to highlight the most important points. And of course, when we teach on it again, we'll deal with it, highlight some other things. But the people of God have got to stay in the light. We cannot mix with darkness. If we mix with darkness, we are violating God's creative order. Now, homosexuality is a violation of God's creative order. And we do not want to be in that same arena. Can you say amen? Of violating God's creative order. His creative order is that light and darkness don't mix. We are supposed to be different. Peter said that we are second chapter, 1 Peter, verse number 8, 9, somewhere around there. We're not going to go there for time's sake. But he says that concerning the church, we are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people. And that word peculiar does not mean weird. It means that we are different. A peculiar people. That we should show forth the praises of him who has called us out of darkness into his what? Marvelous light. And that darkness is sin. And God instituted that sanctification, brought us out of sin, put us into the kingdom of his dear son. Brought us out of the kingdom of darkness, put us in the kingdom of his dear son. And the challenge for us today is to stay separated. Bishop Carl F. Smith preached a dynamic sermon one time. Stay where the blood puts you. If the blood brought you out of darkness into the light, stay in the light. And that's our battle all the time. Our battle today is staying separated, staying in the light, not allowing any darkness at all to come in, because darkness is not of God. So if we allow darkness to come in, that means we are allowing what is not of God to come in. And the only thing that it could possibly do, the effect that it could possibly have upon us, is to drag us back to what God brought us out of in such a subtle fashion that we don't even see it and feel it until it's too late. But this is what he established on the first day. You say amen? In verse 4, God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. Now, let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse number 6. I'm just going to read that, and then we're going to go back to Genesis. Because we have got to get through the first 2 chapters at least tonight. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And I just did not have time to write all the notes down that I need, so I'm just going to go off of memory. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. The significance of God saying, let there be light, and God separating the light from the darkness. All right? 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse number 6. And we won't be calling a whole lot of scriptures, so 2 Corinthians 4, verse number 6. Let's read. For God, who is this now? God. For God who what? Commanded the light to shine what? Where did we read that? That was in Genesis 1. When God said, let there be, that was his commandment. He commanded that. Everything that he said 10 times in Genesis 1, God is recorded and God said. That was his commandments. All right? For God who commanded the light to do what? shine out of darkness. What has he done? Hath shined in our hearts. And why has he done that? To give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of who? And he shined in our hearts when he saved us, so that we could have the knowledge of the glory of God and see it in the image of Jesus Christ. And so being in the light means the salvation of our soul. And we cannot allow darkness to come in. So stay separated. If he has separated us, we must stay separated. It is a commandment of his creative order. It is a commandment to us that we have got to stay separated. The scripture says concerning Jesus that he was separate from sinners. Now, I'm not saying we cannot associate with family members that are not saved. I'm not saying we can't associate with co-workers that are not saved. But in our associations, don't allow yourself to be compromised. Because keep in mind, the devil has always got us on his mind, because we are hindering his work. That's why people get mad at you at times for no reason. I have a lieutenant on my job that is spreading lies among all of the staff, lying on me. Not saying anything about my partner, but it's all on me. Well, of course, because the devil is upset. They don't need me getting mad and calling her in, talking, why are you lying on me? I know why it's going on. It is the devil. Can we say amen? And the devil would like nothing more than to get us upset and get us beside ourselves and get us to react the way that we used to react when people used to lie on us. As a matter of fact, it's a blessing if somebody lying on you. It's a blessing if somebody hates you. It shows that you are a child of God. If everybody loved you, you need to work. You need to watch out. If the homosexual, I just love you, you need to watch out. Can we say amen? Something's wrong somewhere. Jesus said, woe when all men speak well of you. You have to watch it. So back to Genesis 1, and we're going to move on here. He divided that light, called the light day, and the darkness called night. Evening and the morning were the first day. All right, verse number 6. Let's read there. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters what? From the waters. Firmament. So there's waters above, there's waters below. And this is what created the space that we are living in right now. The expanse. Because everything was covered in water. Where there's water, there's life. That's why they're trying to find out if there's water out there in space, because where there's water, there's life. And of course, there is no other people living on those planets out there, because what about their soul if there's other people out there? Jesus would have to die for them too, or, where do they come from? God, as we read earlier on this week, God created the earth to be what? Inhabited. Can we say amen? All right. So, he divided the waters from beneath, from the waters from above. Verse 7. God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. Why? Because God commanded it. And it happened. Let's read. Verse 8. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were. That's what he did on the second day. Now the third day, verse 9, and God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the water called he seas, and God saw that it was good. Now 6 times he says it was good. One time he says it was very good. At the end of the 6th day, he said it was very good. And we'll deal with that significance later on. But in the 3rd day, he creates the earth. Now, everything is orderly as to what he's doing. And scientists have discovered, and they agree, that the creation account is the most accurate account in the biblical creation account is the most accurate, that makes the most sense. Because everything came into existence in an orderly fashion, and they could not have come before the other had came first. It's orderly, all right? Dry land, earth, it was so. Verse 11. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass. Now, this could not have happened unless he had called forth the earth to appear. Once the earth appeared, then he calls forth the what? The grass. Let the earth bring forth grass. Let's read. The herb yielding what? Seed. The herb yielding seed. And the fruit tree yielding what? Fruit. After what? His kind. Everything was to produce after its kind. God established that in the third day of his creative week, that everything that he has created is to come forth after its own kind. That was 3 days he established that before he even made man. So of course, once man comes on the scene, it was already established in the third day of his creative week that his creation was to produce after its what? Own kind. All right. Bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after its kind, whose seed is where? Is in itself upon the earth, and it was what? So. And the earth brought forth grass, herb yielding seed, after its kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after its kind. And God saw that it was what? Good. He established that the third day. Now, seed is within itself. Every fruit has a seed, and that seed is a seed within itself. Inside that seed there's a germ, and that seed is planted in the ground, and the body of that seed dies, and the germ inside of that seed germinates. And then what is planted begins to grow. And it produces after its own kind. Can we say amen? And so when man comes along, the seed that is in man is the soul. And of course, the soul goes to sleep one day, the body of the soul dies, goes back to its original state. Fact of the matter is, scientists have found that in the body of man, there is 19 elements in the body of man that you find also in the dirt of the earth. Because man was created from where? The dust of what? The ground. And they've discovered that there are 19 elements in the human body of man that you can find in the earth. One of the definitions of Adam is red dirt. Now, we don't know what color he was when he was created. Nobody knows. We was born 2,000 years too late or 6,000 years too late. But it doesn't really matter because out of him came all of the races anyway. Yeah. But I want to make this point here. This is very interesting. Now, and we're going to read and get all the way down to verse 24. Each day of creation is how long as we told you? 7,000 years long. If you don't believe that, if we have some people that are watching this Bible class, you study Bible chronology. I said, what is that? Bible chronology. We have a book of Chronicles, don't we? First and Second Chronicles deals with chronology. Biblical chronology is the study of time and dates. If you study biblical chronology, and I know none of you have had, don't worry, I did a lot of the work for you. Can we say amen? And I didn't have to worry because some of the work was done for me. But I have a breakdown, and I should have brought that out. Bishop Paddock, I have this breakdown of the first 4,000 years of man's day. I'm going to give that to you. I'm going to make copies of it. Not very many people have it. I sent one copy down south to a minister. but it shows in detail how there is 4,000 years from Adam to Christ. Now, you have had other scholars and theologians that have studied time. The most popular was by the man named Ussher. I think he was a bishop, Ussher, that studied time. You have John Haley's, I think it's John Haley's book, Haley's Bible Handbook. And you have Ussher that have studied Bible chronology. And of course, they put the time frame from Adam to Abraham at like 2006 years. And they put the birth of Christ at somewhere around 4 BC. But accurately, it is 2,000 years from Adam to Abraham, and 2,000 years from Abraham to Christ. You follow? And of course, Jesus walked the earth some 2,000 years ago, so that puts you at 6,000. And then there's supposed to be a 1,000-year millennial reign, which gives you how many? 7,000. Now, the tribulation period overlaps within that, but we're talking about dispensation. Dispensation is a term that deals with time. God's time is broken up into 7 dispensations, or 7 significant periods that are outlined in the time frame that we call time. Am I confusing you? I ain't saying that, it means y'all listening. Okay? So, when did death come? That's your question. When did death come? When who sinned? Adam sinned. Was there death before Adam sinned? No. There was no death. Now, if you go to the store and buy an orange or whatever kind of fruit, if you don't eat it right away or take care of it, what's going to happen to it? It gets molded. Or in other words, it what? Dies. Same thing with meat. I left some ribs in my trunk. Took me a week to get that smell out. I had to go buy 3 air fresheners and stick them in the trunk to get that smell. It took about a week to get that smell out. But what happened? The meat deteriorated because of death. Is that right? Death entered into the world because of, Paul said, one man's sin. Now, if there was no death before Adam, we are at this time, in our Bible class, we are in what day? The 3rd day. Earth has come forth, the grass is coming forth, the herb yielding seed has come forth, the fruit tree yielding fruit and after its kind. So that means then that the fruit trees came along and the fruit began to grow. But because there was no death, did you not know that that fruit grew and grew and grew and grew for 7,000 years? Now, the largest, what was it? The largest, no, not tree. We are going to deal with the large tree. But the largest, I was just looking at it the other night. In the Guinness Book of World Records, I think the largest squash, I think it is, squash, is 2,032 pounds. That's a big squash, isn't it? You know how long it took the Mathesons to grow that squash? 105 days. Now, if you can grow, if they can grow a squash to the weight of 2,032 pounds in 105 days, then how big did a squash grow in the third day creation for 7,000 years, in the fourth day creation for 7,000 years, in the fifth day of creation for 7,000 years, because there was no death? This gives you some idea that the earth at that time, before Satan fell, was completely different than what we experience now. Fruit, flowers, food, man expire after a certain amount of time because we have death. But the fruit that was created in the third day began to come forth, began to grow and grow, because death did not exist. There was nothing there to kill it. It grew through the third day, it grew through the fourth day, it grew through the fifth day. Fruit grew for 21,000 years. Trees grew for 21,000 years. Now, there are some trees, I think in California, that are as long, or shall I say, that are as wide as the length of a car. And there are some trees that you can actually drive through because they are so large. And they say those trees were here when Jesus walked the earth. That would mean then that those trees are at least 2,000 years old. Can you imagine how large a tree could be in 21,000 years? This is the earth and the world that we did not know, because these things existed throughout the third, fourth, fifth day, and as the fifth day moved into the sixth day, Lucifer fell. Everything that God had created at that point was destroyed. The animals, which would be the dinosaurs, that fed off of these things that were enormous during that time, and they were buried deep beneath the earth and killed and destroyed. And then in the sixth day, God decides he's going to make man. So you can see then that the world at that time was nothing like it is now. What is the condition of it is now? Without form and void. Or in other words, it lost the original form that it had. All that in the book of first chapter. Isn't that something? So, everything grew because there was no death. Things die because of what? Death. All right? So, I'm just kind. God saw that it was what? Good. Because the dinosaurs and the great fowls of the air that lived in the fifth day, they had to have something to survive on. And that's what they ate. Now, again, the Bible doesn't give us a whole lot of detail about what happens, because as we've read on the first day of us dealing with this subject, this is the book of the generations of Adam. It just deals with man's day. But it gives us a little glimpse of what happened or what transpired in some of the other days. All right? Let's pick it up, verse 14. And God said, let there be what? Lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide what? The day from what? The night. So now the lights is coming to divide the day from the night. And let them be for signs, for season, and for days and what? Years. That's 3 verse 15. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. The sun was to divide the light from what? The light from what? What was to do it? The light from that. What was to divide it? The sun. And of course, in Malachi, the last chapter of Malachi, it talks about Jesus being the Sun, S-U-N, of righteousness, with healings in his wings. Jesus makes the difference He's the one that makes the difference between us, the children of God, and the children of the world. He makes the difference. Salvation makes the difference. Can we say amen? Verse 19. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Now the fifth day. This is the day that the dinosaurs lived. All right? But keep in mind, you had trees that have been growing now for 14,000 years. Fruit have been growing for 14,000 years. Grass has been growing for how long? Because there's no death. There's nothing to kill it. There's no death. Well, somebody said, well, what about the wintertime and all that? There was no death. Things died because of death. There was no death. So these things grew and grew and grew. Now we enter into the fifth day, and for the first time, the earth is going to have sound. Let's read. And God said, let the waters bring forth what? Abundantly. Where do these creatures come from? The waters. Abundantly. The moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which what? The waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were what? Fifth day. They were fruitful and they multiplied. In a world, in an earth that we know nothing about. Because you can't imagine what a tree, what a fruit, what grass, what the earth looked like, constantly growing, constantly evolving for 7,000 years in each day. And of course, since the third day, 21,000 years these things grew. And so when Satan decided he wanted to be like God, everything was destroyed. Angels were over the earth at the time, as we read on a few days ago, and God took the authority from the angels at that time. And then we move into the sixth day. And this is why, and this is how they're finding all of these things buried beneath the earth. And in some museums in Siberia, they have these creatures that are there as they looked when they lived, with all of the hair and everything intact as to what they looked like when they were in the earth. We can't deny that they did not exist. Somebody said, well, yeah, Noah took 2 of them of every kind in the ark. Not those animals. Because we have 2 different types of animals. Some in the ones in the 5th day came from the waters. The one of the 6th day came from the earth. And the creatures that came from the earth after man came along are the creatures that we know of today. Now, I know that they say they're finding footprints of that supposedly that man did walk the earth during the time of dinosaurs. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know the things of God. He did not create man in the 5th day. He created man in what day? The 6th day. So at that time, there was no man. So what are these creatures that they finding that had feet that looked like man? We don't know what they were. They're finding creatures now that they didn't know that existed before. Is that right? All of the time. Man thinks he knows everything. He knows less than what he really thinks he knows when it comes to the things of God. So, as the 5th day began to move to the 6th day, Lucifer fell. Earth had lost its original form. And of course, God says this, verse 24, I'm sorry. And God said, let the earth bring forth what? The living creature after how? His kind, cattle and creeping thing, beasts of the earth after his kind, and it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, cattle after their kind, everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was what? Those little creepy crawlers that you see, God what? He made them. Can we say amen? The roach, the spider, centipede, we won't go down the list, but we know he made them all. Is that right? Now, we're not saying that you can't kill them if they flat, we didn't say that. We just told you he made them. Well, a lot of people like to say that the Bible is contradictory because it mentions the creatures in verse 24 and 25, and then in verse 26 it mentions man. Whereas in Genesis chapter 2, it mentions man first, then the animals. And so they say that the Bible is contradictory because which came first, man or the animals? In the first chapter, they say animals came first. Second chapter, man came first. Well, there's no contradiction. The contradiction is just in their minds because man did come first. But what they have overlooked is verse 24. And let's go back at that. Look at that. And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature. That's man. Keep in mind, in the first chapter, we're dealing with God's blueprint. What he has what? Planned to do. And in the second chapter, Moses gives us the narrative as to the fact that he's actually now making what he planned on. He picked it up in the sixth day. Because in verse 24, and God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature. Living creature comes from the Hebrew word nephesh, which means a living soul. Animals do not have souls. The only creature of God's creation that has a soul, which is made in the image of him, is man. So when he says in verse 24, and God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature or the living soul, and let it bring it forth after its what? Kind. That's man. That's Adam. Then after that, all of the animals. You follow? So it's right in line with the second chapter of Genesis because Adam named all of the animals that were brought forth after he was made. Now, verse 26, we have something a little different. Verse 26, let's read. And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. All right, now this is different because he already created man in verse 24. So what is this in verse 26? First of all, what day are we dealing with here? What day are we dealing with? What day? Sixth day. The sixth day starts with the beginning of who? Man. Is that right? Then the animals. And God saw that it was good. Then in verse 26, he says, and God said, let us make man in our image and after what? Our likeness. Now, why would God say that when he's already called for the man, the living creature, the living soul, to come forth from the earth? Well, first of all, what we have to realize is that we are in the sixth day in this verse. Number two, what shall I say? Number one, we're not dealing with in the beginning, we're dealing with an event that occurred in the sixth day. Number two, he says he already had called for the earth to bring forth the living creature in verse 24, which began the sixth day. The sixth day begins with the making of man. And he made man, he made the animals. Is that right? Now, as we go further into the sixth day, he says, and God said, let us make man in our image. A lot of people like to try to say this is the Trinity. There is no Trinity, so it can't be the Trinity. Some people say he was talking to the devil. God does not compromise with the devil. The devil had no part in making anything. Some say he was talking to the angels. Not so. He was talking to those that had the same image as he had. And since this is in the middle of the sixth day, not at the beginning, but in the middle of the sixth day, the only ones he could be talking to was his church. Because if we are dealing with time and God's plan, his church has got to be in there somewhere. And that's what this is right now. Because the church of God is the only people that is assisting God, or that God is using to make man in his image and after his likeness. His spiritual image and his spiritual likeness. Well, let's prove that to you. He said, let who make man? Us make man. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 1. Somebody said, well, he's talking to the church. The church didn't exist at the time. But God in Isaiah 46:10 declares the end from what? The beginning. And in Romans it says God calls those things that be not as though they were. God is so powerful. Elohim is so powerful that he could speak to his church before his church ever comes into existence. He can do that because he's Elohim. In his all-powerfulness, God speaks in his creative plan to the church that has not even come into existence yet. That the church, or that he will use the church to make man into the image that he wants him to be, into his spiritual image, and after his what? Likeness. All right? Let us, Ephesians chapter 1, verse number 4. Us, let us. Who is the us? Verse number 4, Ephesians 1, verse 4. Let's read. According as he hath chosen who? Us. Chosen us when? In him, before the foundation of what? World. When God said, let us make man, that was before the foundation of the world, in his plan. But it was not to happen until the middle of the sixth day, after man has come on the scene. So, what is the fulfillment of let us make man? The Great Commission is the fulfillment of that. Jesus said, go ye therefore, teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I commanded you. That was the fulfillment of God saying, let us make man. God uses the church to make us into the image of his Son. What's his Son's name? Jesus. God uses the church. So he was talking to those that had the same image that he had. He had it first. And he, in his plan, in his mind, chose us, the church, in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and without blame before him in what? In love. So when he said, let us make man, he was talking to the church. Some people like to say he was talking to his wisdom. Well, the Bible says in Christ, in the church, is hidden all the wisdom and knowledge of God. So you still can't get around the church. Because in his 50,000 year plan, what he wanted was a people unto himself. And that's why he says, according as he hath chosen us in him before the foundation of the world. And his choice was that we would be holy and without blame before him in love. You follow? Well, let's go to another scripture. Let's go to Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8, verse number 29. Romans chapter 8, verse 29. Let us make man in our image and after our likeness. Romans chapter 8, verse 29. All right. If we have it, let's read it. Let's read it slowly now. Let's read verse 29. For whom he did foreknow, hold it, foreknow, the foreknowledge of God, which simply is what God knew beforehand. What God knew before anything existed. He knew us, for whom he foreknew. He knew us before we were created. He knew everything before it existed. He told Jeremiah, before you were formed in the womb, I knew you. Can you say amen? God in his foreknowledge. All right? For whom he did foreknow, what did he do? He also did predestinate. Predestinate means to determine beforehand. Those that he knew before they came into existence, he had already determined before they came into existence, those that he foreknew, that they should be what? Conformed to the image of his what? Son. This is what God determined before the foundation of the world. That's why he said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, because those that he foreknew, he had already determined beforehand that when they would come about, that they would be just like Jesus or just like him. Because God is the highest form of right, light, holiness, just, good that anybody could ever possibly be. And his holiness is so rich and his righteousness is so high that we can't do it by ourselves. He's got to do it through us. And so what did he do? He gave us his word, gave us the Holy Ghost, gave us the name, washed our sins away, and said, let me work on you through the church to make you into being just like me. You say amen? Let us make man in our what? Image. There is no greater image to be made into than to be made to be like Jesus. There was a woman online that spent $30,000 to look like Kim Kardashian. $30,000. We could have got some new pews in here for $30,000. What a waste of money. To be like somebody that one day gonna get old and gonna pass away, just like anything else in this world. Let me say amen. But there is an image of God that can never pass away. And that image of God is Jesus Christ. And God already determined before the foundation of the world that those that he knew beforehand, he had already determined that we would be conformed into the image of his dear son. A conformation has got to take place. He's got to bring us out of darkness, put us in the marvelous light, and then we got to be conformed. Or as one writer puts it, transformed by the renewing of our mind. And how was God to accomplish all this? He said, I'll give you pastors according to my heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and what? Understanding. He has set some of the church, first apostles, secondarily prophets, thirdly evangelists, pastors and teachers for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ. Or in other words, so that we be like him. That's what it's all about. In the sixth day, it was to start. And it started when Jesus commissioned his apostles, go forth. And the church dispensation started. And that's what God is doing today. He is fulfilling right now, making man in his image and after his likeness through the church of God, through us. And that's different than saying, let the earth bring forth the living creature. We already made in his natural image. Now we have to be made in his spiritual image through the church. And we're out of time. Let's go back to the first chapter of Genesis. So let God make you. Can we say amen? Look what all the Jesus, I can't put up with that. I can't deal with that. What did Jesus deal with? What did the image of God deal with? If the image of God dealt with it, and we're supposed to be like him, then we're supposed to what? We're supposed to do it. If the image of God endured all that he endured, what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to what? Endure also. Can we say amen? Because we're being made into that image. We're being fashioned to be like him. All right? God said, let's make man in our image, after our likeness. All right? Let's read it now. He goes back to natural man. Let's read. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth what? Upon the earth. The first two clauses of verse 26 have nothing to do with the rest of the verse. But it appears that it does, because that's how the Bible is what? Written, to throw people off. He ain't dealing with creating man in verse 26. He already dealt with that in verse 24. But after he makes that statement, then he goes back into what natural man is supposed to have in the new world, or in the earth that he had created. Dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, and over everything over the earth, every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Verse 27. So God, what? Created man in his own image. We are created in the natural image of God. Natural image. You want to see what God, the image of God is? Look in the mirror. That's the natural image. But as we told you before, if there's something that is natural, there's also a what? Spiritual side. And in Colossians chapter 1, Jesus is called the image of the invisible God. We're already made in his natural image. It is through his church that we are being made after his spiritual image. All right? So, this is the natural image. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, what? Created he him. Male and female created he what? Them. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. Verse 29. God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in the which is the fruit of a tree, yielding seed. To you it shall be meat, and to every beast of the earth, and every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was what? Now, he has not said that yet. That has not come to pass yet. He said it in his plan, in his foreknowledge, but we are still in the sixth day. And everything is not good at all. The airplane, the 777 that was shot down out of the sky by a missile traveling 2,686 miles an hour, and took that plane out at an altitude of 33,000 feet in 40 seconds. They never saw it coming. And they're saying now it was an accident, which probably was, because there had been 2 jets shot down last week, because Ukrainians are experiencing civil war. And that nuclear war, that warhead that carry explosives at the head of that missile that weighed 154 pounds, they shot that thing off. It traveled at almost 2,700 miles an hour at a plane flying, moving 500 miles an hour, 33,000 feet in the sky, and it hit it in 40 seconds, blew it up. Isn't that something? Well, everything is not very good. But when the 6th day ends, it will end at the white throne of judgment. The devil will be cast in the lake of fire. The wicked will be cast in the lake of fire. Those judged righteous at the white throne of judgment will be placed on the new earth. The tribulation saints will be caught up and will be dwelling in heaven. The church of God, the bride of Christ, will be in her new house, the holy city, in heaven. Death will be cast into the lake of fire. Everything will be complete. And when the 6th day ends, that's when this will be fulfilled. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. He said it in his plan, but it has not happened yet because we're still in the 6th day. But after he gets his children on the new earth, after he gets his bride in heaven, after he saves the remnant of Israel that will dwell in heaven as part of the heavenly seed, he will have the earthly seed on the earth. He will have the heavenly seed in heaven. He will have his bride, and he would have brought to pass the promise he made to Abraham that he will have children of the stars of the sky and the sand upon the seashore. Death will be destroyed, and in the end of the 6th day, God will look at everything that he has made, and he will say it's very good. But we're not there yet. Can we say amen? That's the first chapter. And we got to close. Didn't get to the second, did we? There's a whole lot in here. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am. In Matthew 4, 18 and 19. In Matthew 4, in 18, 19, and Jesus walking by the Sea of Galilee saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he said unto them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. All right. What was it that made them follow him? Because he was God, and he told them what to do, and they did it. That's how that was. He said unto them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Well, of course, he had that power to do it. He speak it, they immediately dropped what they were doing, and they followed him. Because he was God, he had that power to speak the word, and they made the choice to follow him. Because they obviously saw something different about him. Anybody else? Here are the questions. If you got questions, ask. Don't be afraid. No questions? Yes, ma'am? Everybody that calls himself a prophet today, are they self-made prophets? Well, yes and no, I guess we can say. The term prophet is an archaic term, which means it's no longer in common usage. And when people like to boast themselves of being a prophet, we have one woman that calls herself a prophetess. Number one, they really don't know what they're saying, because they really don't know what that is. The New Testament prophet is the pastor. Okay? So every pastor is a prophet, because that's one of the 18 titles of the pastor. And a lot of times these people like to use these titles and terms because they are trying to be original and wind up being original all right and nothing. But if they really understood the office of the prophet in the Old Testament, the prophet in the Old Testament, God set his anointing upon them and used them. When he got done, finished with them, he took his anointing back and they were just like anybody else. So if they call themselves prophets, you see what I'm saying? So they really don't understand what they're saying. So I would have to say that 95 to 98%, I would say 98% of people that walk around call themselves prophets don't really know what they're talking about. Because prophets in the Old Testament, they prophesied doom. A lot of these so-called prophets today want to prophesy blessings. And the prophet today just means preacher. But they like to use these titles to appear original where in fact they don't even know what they're talking about. Yes? Right. Right, right. Well, yeah, they said, do you have a, she asked, they said, do you have a prophet in your church? She said, Pastor, no, I'm talking about a prophet because I know some prophets that's gone through some prophetical training. There's no such thing as prophetical training. These people they're just mixed, they're just confused. They're confused. And, it's amazing how blinded people really are to the truth. There's no such thing as prophetical training. None of that. That's something that man has made up to make some money and try to portray themselves to being more than what they really are, to try to distinguish themselves from somebody else. That's all that is. Anybody else? It's a good question, though, good point. All right, well, we're going to close tonight.
Thanks for watching Light for Living with Pastor Rainer Johnson.